Welcome to week 24 of the Tech and Productivity Update. We've got quite a bit of news this week, so let's get right to it. On the 12th, Moonshot Labs released Kimi K2.7-Code edition, which according to them is obviously their best coding agents. Here we have some benchmarks that Moonshot Labs provided. Obviously just a bunch of coding and agentic benchmarks. The darker blue is the 2.7 code version, and the lighter blue is the previous version, which is just Kimi K2.6. And next to that, we have GPT 5.5 extra high and Opus 4.6 extra high. So obviously it's not going to be near the performance of the frontier models from the private labs, but still nice to see Moonshot Labs continuing to improve their Kimi series model. They also mentioned up to 30% less reasoning token models used compared to the previous version, and improvements for long horizon coding tasks. Next up, Notion is migrating from Electron to SwiftUI for the Mac application. So this wasn't actually released as a press release by Notion. This was actually featured during Apple's Platform State of the Union developer session, which is something for developers where they announce all the upcoming improvements to the operating system, to Xcode, platform updates, APIs, basically things that developers are going to be interested in that are going to be released very soon to macOS, iOS, and all the other Apple platforms. And during one of those sessions, they actually used Notion as an example, so that's why we know that it's moving from Electron, which is a web-based architecture that's going to be rewritten in native SwiftUI. So that means it's going to be much faster and give us much better performance compared to the current Electron-based app. On the 11th, Linear launched coding sessions. So there's this thing called Linear Agent, which is an agent inside the Linear application for organizing coding projects primarily. And it can now write and modify code using Claude Code and Codex. So the coding actually runs in the cloud. It does require a GitHub account with code access, and it's also going to consume AI credits. So it's available only to certain subscription tiers with Linear. If you happen to use Linear, this is going to potentially really reduce the iterative loop that you have where issues come and end up in Linear, and then a developer takes those and hands them over to a coding agent or works on them themselves, because now you'll be able to kickstart those coding sessions from inside of Linear and potentially just have them run automatically. So issues come into Linear, coding agents will detect that. They'll be able to kick off cloud coding sessions and then let you know when those are finished for a human in the loop to review. And so just making that process much smoother and that iterative loop of fixing things and having the agent actually code things much shorter. On the 10th, Google announced their new DiffusionGemma model. It's an experimental open model, and it uses diffusion-based generation instead of the traditional left-to-right autoregression system that all the other large language models use. So where the thing is being written from left to right, as you might see in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, that's the standard left to right autoregression that's being used to generate the text, where each token is built on the next one. The way this diffusion-based generation works is much closer to the way that image generation works for AI. So you start with kind of this noisy generation, a set of random pixels, just a starting point, and then the model iterates over those pixels to get a clearer and clearer image as the model figures out exactly what it's trying to do. But now we're going to get that for writing and coding. So it works by generating 256 token blocks in parallel. That also means you're going to be able to significantly speed up models like DiffusionGemma that run on, let's say, more consumer-grade hardware. It's still going to be dedicated GPUs and such, but they'll be running much faster. And one additional improvement of this is because it's generating these token blocks in parallel versus in a linear fashion, it's going to be able to better align things. For example, if you're writing a very large document, you want to make some small changes in the middle. The way the traditional left to right autoregression model would do it is it would have to start at the very top and then rewrite everything and just make those tiny changes where you want it to. The way that this diffusion-based model is going to be able to do it is actually make just the changes to those blocks. That means it's very likely we're going to see this diffusion-based generation become much more popular in other models because it's much better suited at things like making small coding changes. It doesn't have to rewrite the entire code. It can actually just make small changes throughout the code much more precisely than the models that we have right now. Google says it's built on top of their Gemma 4 model. However, this new diffusion-based model is actually not quite as performant as the Gemma 4 model. Gemma 4 model was meant to be a smaller but still capable enough model that people could run it on consumer-grade hardware. So it's interesting to see Google adopt this architecture and really double down on it. I think they're going to have a lot of success, and we're going to see this type of diffusion-based generation spread to all the other major labs over time. On the 9th, Anthropic released Claude Fable 5 and Mythos 5. Fable 5 is the public release, and Mythos 5 is the private release for the researchers and the partners that they let have access to it. Both of them are based on the same model. However, Fable has much tighter guardrails around cybersecurity, biology and chemistry, and also distillation. So still very capable, but just a bit more picky about the types of topics that it's going to let you use it for. There's also some data retention issues I've seen people mention. For this new model, Anthropic will keep all user data for at least 30 days, and that goes back to their tighter guardrails around cybersecurity, biology, and so on. Because they claim the model is so capable, there's just much more potential for bad actors to use it, and so they want to make sure that they're able to catch people misusing the models, and to do that, they need to retain all the user data. At least that's according to them. The pricing is $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens. That's double what we pay today for Opus 4.8. So very expensive, but not nearly as expensive. I think when Mythos 5 was released to their internal partners, it was at least double or triple that. So still pretty expensive, but not quite as expensive maybe as we would have expected. Right now, it's currently available through the API, but there is going to be a brief trial for all subscribers until June 22nd. And at that point, they will pull it from the subscriptions, and then you'll only be able to access it through the API, at least according to what they said on the 9th. On the 8th, Apple announced iOS 27 and macOS Golden Gate. We saw a lot of small visual tweaks. Some of that involved rolling back some of those liquid glass visuals that they really promoted early on. Now they're kind of rolling some of those back just because they're maybe not quite what people were expecting or really wanted in the operating system. We also got the debut of Siri AI, which is their next generation foundational model that's going to be used for Apple Intelligence. This is the one that was built in collaboration with Google, so it should be much better than what Siri is today. Some of the highlights they have are things like it can track multi-turn conversations, like all the other large language models that are available besides Siri. It has full on-screen awareness. It understands personal context. It's going to be able to, with your permission, scan your emails, your text, your photos, so you'll be able to reference things that are very personal to you, and it'll be able to pull from those contexts in its answers. It's also going to live in a dedicated Siri app that syncs your history across iCloud so you can continue conversations from one device to the other. This release also drops support for Intel-based Macs. So if you have a Mac that's still running on Intel hardware, Golden Gate is the one you're not going to be able to upgrade to. They are only going to support starting from the M1-based Macs onwards. Some of the smaller updates include Apple Notes finally getting native copy and paste as Markdown support. Safari will also let you monitor pages for changes and can notify you of those. Some of the examples that they gave are if you're waiting for a price drop or a product to be restocked or maybe a registration form to open, Safari will now be able to monitor those and let you know when the page changes and those things happen. And lastly, you can now also build complex Apple shortcuts just by describing them using the new Apple Intelligence system. So there were obviously a bunch of other things announced for iOS 27 and Golden Gate, but these are the ones that I felt were the most important for the update. And starting on the 8th, we got a bunch of OpenAI updates. The first one is that ChatGPT on the web and on the iOS and Android apps got interactive charts. So now if your answer would benefit from a graph, ChatGPT will generate that and display interactive bar, line, pie, scatter graphs, all types of graphs. For conversations that have 5 or more responses, you're also now going to get a table of contents that let you more easily navigate longer conversations. And we also got full screen writing blocks, plus the ability to email directly from chat if you have Gmail or Outlook connected to ChatGPT. Here's what those writing blocks look like. So now I can click on edit and I'll be able to edit right here as part of my answer, continue the conversation there, or I can click right here to open an email and it gives me the options to send it through Gmail, Outlook, or some other email app if I have those connected. So this is useful if you happen to use ChatGPT to draft emails. You can also click on this little icon right here to view the draft in full screen. Then you'll be able to enter in here, edit. It seems like you've got some additional format options. So that just makes for a nicer writing and drafting experience with ChatGPT on the web. On the 10th, they also simplified the model picker. So previously we got instant, thinking light, thinking standard, thinking extended, thinking heavy, and then pro standard and pro extended if you have a subscription. Now they removed thinking light and have also simplified the naming scheme. So it's now instant, medium, there's no light, standard is now medium, extended is high, heavy is extra high, and pro standard and Pro Extend to just stay as they are. So just a little bit of cleanup on the model picking side. On the 11th, Codex got developer mode, which means browser using Chrome, which is an option with Codex, or Codex also has an in-app browser. Both of those now have access to the dev tools, which means whatever model you're using in Codex is going to be able to look at the console, look at all the dev tools you normally have for things like debugging, testing speed, all kinds of network things as well. All are now available to Codex and whatever model you're using in the app. And lastly, again on the 11th, Codex users can now save rate limit resets. So Plus and Pro users get rate limit reset banking. You don't have to use them immediately. Previously, when there was some sort of a technical issue or they fixed a bug with Codex, they would reset the user's limits back to 0 in case they happen to be experiencing the bug and maybe they were burning through their tokens much faster. Obviously, you didn't get to pick when that happened. You just checked your limits and saw that it was, for some reason, now back to 0. Now what's going to happen is you get to pick when you apply that reset. So this also includes one free reset at launch, just to kind of celebrate that you can do that, I guess, and the ability to send referral invitations to get up to 3 additional rate limit resets. And these banked resets are usable for 30 days after they're granted. So they do expire at some point, but now you've got a window of 30 days to decide when you actually want to use it. Maybe you end up using a bunch of tokens first and then resetting so you get the maximum benefit. And that was it for week 24's tech and productivity updates. I try to go a bit faster than usual just because it's a lot of news and it can get tiring. So for this edition and subsequent editions, I'm going to try to keep things really short, really concise, just give you the bullet points, the most important takeaways, and then that'll be it. So be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next edition of tech and productivity updates. So I'll see you then.